former colleague, Russ Vought, former OMB director. He's now president of the Center for Renewing America. So, Russ, look, if these guys believe this stuff, you'd think they'd show it. I mean, they don't even have a fiction of balancing the budget. And I look at the baseline, I look at the OMB baseline. There's no steady reduction in budget deficits, and there's no steady reduction in borrowing. There's nothing, Russ Vought. So I thought we'd bring you in, hear you out as a former budget director.
It's a great point, Larry. Presidential budgets are post-policy. It is basically their opportunity to whiteboard how would we solve this fiscal insanity that we're facing. And we can have a debate about the various trade-offs. They want to tax more. We don't. We want to have lower spending. But they're not even willing to have an honest conversation. They're not even willing to be able to put forward policies that could get to a better steady state because they just want to basically keep the status quo, create as much problem for the Fed as necessary, and get through this election and keep on business as usual. And unfortunately, I look at this and I think there's nothing new. It's all the same, and it's a little boring, to be honest with you.
It's a little boring. Edward Lawrence, I know you made a valiant effort, but Ms. Yellen didn't really want to deal with the borrowing issue, and she didn't want to deal with the taxing issue. And the other thing that I probably should have put in my riff, they don't really have any spending cuts in this budget. I mean, they have some user fees, okay? Yeah. And that stuff is scored as a spending cut, but that's not a real spending cut. I mean, they don't do anything to restrain spending as far as I can tell.
Yeah, in the proposed budget, $7.3 trillion in spending and $5.5 trillion in taxes with the increases there, and that's a deficit of $1.8 trillion in 2025. So, yeah, and I tried to ask her, I tried to nail her down about talking about can you tax your way into prosperity, but then also, you know, what about these cutting in order to get a balanced budget? The secretary went on to say that, yeah, you know, they would like to see the deficit come down, and there's some and the debt come down, and there's some deficit reduction that the president is doing, but then went on to say that we need these investments that they're making in America with all the programs that they have. So there was really an evasion of the question there about whether they would balance the budget. I asked when could a balanced budget come in play, and there just wasn't an answer for that, saying that we needed these investments that the president's doing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Russ, it's just very interesting to me. She's being very cagey. Look, Ms. Yellen's a very smart lady. I'm not saying she's not. Her hands are tied with respect to policies I'm not sure even she basically agrees with. But I want to make one point. If you don't cut spending someplace, somehow, you're never going to even curb budget deficits. You want to grow the economy. She's got a 2% growth path. Okay, that's kind of standard Washington stuff, especially with all those tax hikes. It probably will come in lower than 2. But that's the convention. Everybody has 2% growth path. But if you don't cut spending, Russ Vought, somewhere, somehow, someplace, you are never going to get even remotely close to a balanced budget.
Well, it's more than even just a balanced budget. It is, if you don't take care of spending and the fiscal situation, what happens is you enter a crisis and you can't predict when the crisis is going to happen. And then you get into a real austerity moment. They used to say, remember during the Obama administration, we're all talking about austerity. That's not austerity. Austerity is what Greece faced. It's what some of these countries that are in a particular bind because people don't want their debt anymore. And long term, we could be facing that, and we don't know when it's going to happen. And so by us not getting a handle on stuff that's easy to cut, get rid of the discretionary bloat and the bureaucracy that's killing the country and dividing us on the basis of race and identity. Just to start there, start with the foreign aid. By not even going after that, they're putting us in a situation where we could be facing fiscal doom, and we won't be able to predict when it will happen.
Yeah. Edward Lawrence, I hate to pick at nits, but after all, the CPI did go up 18.6% from January of 2021. Groceries up 21%, gasoline up 39%. Yep. And I know you raised this because you're such a mean interviewer, but the reality is real wages have actually fallen. If you measure it during the Biden 3 years, it dropped by 4.7%. She was using 2019 as a baseline. Now, I know that real wages went up during the Trump years. I get that. But they've gone down during the Biden years. That's the reason Trump's doing so well in the polls. People want to go back to the the increase in real wages. But that was pretty cagey, using 2019. The 2019 and 2020 were Trump years, Edward Lawrence.
Yeah, it was March of 2019 that she was using, so you're looking at early 2019.
Right.
Yeah, and I pointed out to her that's well before President Biden's policies were put into place. So you start from that location. This is where we were, and here's where we are now when this president went into office. And she changed the subject, saying that they have to do investments in order to get the economy going. One interesting point. I did talk to her also about credit card debt, not just debt within the federal government, and she believed that the credit card debt was manageable right now for Americans, and it seems like it's sort of inching up with the delinquencies related to credit cards as well as autos. It seems like there might be a breaking point for the consumer at some point, possibly in this year, and she didn't feel like that was going to come. She felt like people were in a pretty good financial situation and called it normalization of where the delinquencies would be.
Yeah. The other thing is, Edward, I don't want to dwell on this, but this business about billionaires don't pay their fair share. Once again, Janet Yellen knows better. But the fact is, you can't judge billionaire income based on unrealized capital gains law that's never been passed. And they keep doing that. They keep adding that income in and then showing an 8% average tax rate. But there's no law. There is no such thing as unrealized capital gain. There are no transactions. There's no legislation. Janet Yellen knows this, but I guess she feels like she has to play along with her boss. Russell Vought, let me ask you something. With respect to Mr. Trump, who has got a decent lead on the economic polling now, rescission authority, budget impoundment authority, and just in general, tough on budget cutting. He's going to have to do it if he gets elected.
Well, look, I think people should judge him by the budgets that he's put forward. It's always been a misnomer that the president wasn't willing to tackle our fiscal situation. He proposed more spending cuts and reductions and reforms than any president in history, and it was largely ignored by Congress, and he was facing an uphill Congress. Now, he has also put forward proposals like revising impoundment authority that 200 years of presidents had. What I believe, when that went away at the lowest part of the executive branch political capital, that was the original sin that allowed you to no longer have a separation of powers fight to control spending. It was basically whatever Congress said it would be. So I think people should look at what he has put forward as the most substantive set of policies over a period of years, including what he is now putting out on his Agenda 47 webpage, and judge him by that. And I think what they will find is a heavy focus on growth. They will see policies that get us going again, and that's vital to the fiscal picture. And then they'll see a sequence of going after the discretionary spending that's the bureaucracy. It's a third of what is necessary spending-wise to deal with our fiscal house in order to get it in order. And then you'll see things like welfare reform and being able to make sure that we don't have this huge hammock of benefits that keep people from entering the labor force. That is really how he has approached spending, and I think it makes a ton of sense. Right. And it is the way that Congress could pass it if they were willing to give it a second look.
All right, Russ Vought, thank you. Edward Lawrence, great work, great interview. Thanks for helping out, as always.